We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.
You've tuned in to Rescue the Rescuer, the show that focuses on helping first responders who may be experiencing challenges such as addiction, PTSD, relationship failure, and more. We use stories of struggle and recovery to highlight successful survival strategies for those in this powerfully stressful field of work. And now, here's your host, Steven Kavalkovich.
Hey everyone, this is Steven. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'm a former paramedic in long-term recovery from addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've created this podcast to help others who may be experiencing a story similar to mine find a path beyond their problems and towards a life that they deserve. Before we get started with today's episode, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters. I recently read an article that said 81% of Americans would like to become a published author. Chances are you might be one of them, right? I know I am. So what's stopping us? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work, can be a pain, and is expensive too, right? Not anymore. For my next book project, I've teamed up with Hassle-Free Books. They're making it easy for me to become an author. They're removing a lot of the fuss and struggle and making it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to HassleFreeBooks.com and use promo code RESCUE to receive a 10% discount off any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. That's HassleFreeBooks.com. Promo code RESCUE. All right, thanks again for joining me, and let's get started with today's show. Welcome back, guys, to another exciting episode of Rescue the Rescuer. And I have a really cool guy that I've been wanting to get on the show. He's actually one of the first person I spoke to right before the show aired for the first time. And it's just been a little challenge to be able to meet up and finally get a chance to get him on the show. But I am excited to talk to him. So without really further ado, we don't have to go crazy as far as doing an introduction. I think him talking will speak for itself. So tonight I've got Mark Golfelder on the line. He's a lieutenant firefighter paramedic with the Tarpon Springs, Florida Fire Rescue, and has over 25 years of combined fire and EMS experience. He's also the president of the Five Bugles Institute, which is a fire service education provider in the state of Florida. And he also is doing some, he's doing some pretty kind of cutting edge work as far as what I like to call it, trying to really actually identify and utilize the word brotherhood that's used so frequently in the fire service. But sometimes, its meaning gets lost, especially when it comes to brothers who are struggling with life issues. So I got Mark on the line. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening.
It's great to have you. Great to have you. Basically, we got kind of connected through somebody else who's a therapist who works, she's a trauma therapist, I think a little further south than you, or south, I guess, west from where you're located. And she had recommended that I get you on the line. And I was definitely intrigued to, see what you were doing. So why don't you give me a little bit of, kind of in your own words, why don't you talk about where your angle is as far as not just doing the actual firefighting and EMS provider work that, first responders do, but doing a little bit more to ensure the overall health and well-being of the Brotherhood, essentially.
Absolutely. Happy to. I guess probably the easiest way for me to start is just kind of a little quick nuts and bolts about me. I'm from the New York City area originally. Been in the fire service, fire and EMS for a little over 28 years. I spent time in suburban New Jersey and then 10 years in the Midwest, and eventually ended up down here in Florida in 2003. And I've been an instructor for over 20 years, various disciplines. I was an ACLS instructor, fire service instructor, you name it. I love being an instructor. It's always been a passion of mine. Five Bugles was founded in 2010 as a fire service education company. And we basically provide prerequisite education classes to fire service personnel in the state who are looking to take their state certification exams for anything from instructor to officer and you name it. On top of that, we're also a training provider for the Florida Bureau of Fire Prevention, which gives us the opportunity to educate and provide continuing education for professional contractors through the state.
Got a lot on your plate. Not only are you working, as a full-time regular, on a regular shift in a firehouse, but you're also educating and helping to bring up the next generation of firefighters and providers as well too. So it's pretty busy living you got going on down there.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you what. There's a retired fire chief that's very well known in the fire service named Rick Lasky. He's a retired chief from Louisville, Texas. And he wrote a book called Pride and Ownership. And his teachings are about restoring some of the great things about the fire service. And I say fire service, but in reality, we can apply this to the entire emergency services arena, whether it's fire, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's EMS, combination thereof.
Okay.
And for me, one of the biggest observations that I have in my career, having seen what I've seen over 28 years and a little more, is that the fire service has lost the meaning of what it is to have a brotherhood, and I look at some of the research that shows that the guys coming into the fire service now have the capacity to be the most productive workforce in history. From the time that they come into the fire service enter their workforce to the time they retire, they are pure productivity because their whole life has been spent multitasking.
Wow, that's a very interesting point. Wow. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that you just I sit here a little bit with my jaw dropped because I never really made that correlation, but that makes a lot of sense. But it sounds like there's a but also.
There's a very large but involved. The same research that highlights the productivity that's capable from this workforce also shows that this same workforce will change their careers, not their jobs, but their careers, as many as 6 times from the time they enter the workforce to the time they retire. And that is because they get easily bored. It's tough to instill that loyalty, that dedication, which means that from our perspective in the emergency services arena and specifically in the fire service, we need to understand and help these kids understand what is the history of the fire service. What are the traditions of the fire service? Nobody put a gun in, and we talk about this in a lot of our classes. We say nobody put a gun to your head and said, go to Fire Academy and get it and put in an application. You chose this for a reason. And for you to understand what it means to be able to wear that thing on your chest, that emblem, that badge on your chest that gives you an honor and privilege of knowing what it means to be a firefighter or being called firefighter. You need to have an understanding of who you are and where you've come from. If you don't know where you've come from, you have no idea where you are right now. More so if you don't have, and that being the case, it continues on. It means you certainly have no idea where you're going in the future. So in that respect, we have a responsibility as senior personnel to educate the new generation and help them to understand. Now, over my time frame in the fire service and the EMS arenas, I've seen a lot of stuff. And I am a passionate instructor. I work as hard as I can to be the most effective I can in my classrooms. And I also started doing some public speaking. And, I do some classes on leadership and how to survive and create culture change within an organization. And of course, from my own personal experiences and my research, I've done a lot of research and learned a lot about first responder stress up to including post-traumatic stress disorder and first responder suicides. And in all honesty, I thought up until just over 2 years ago, I thought I had a pretty good grip until I had a single incident that occurred to me. I am one of my side interests because, firefighters, we don't do this for the money. So we have 2 and 3 side jobs.
Of course.
But same thing with most EMS professionals and a lot of law enforcement officers.
Sure.
But I'm a college baseball umpire as well. And so I was out working a national tournament in Wichita, Kansas. And on a freak, fluke, tragic accident, I was the home plate umpire when 9-year-old Kaiser Carlisle, who was a Batboy for the liberal Kansas BJs, was tragically struck and killed by an on-deck batter. He walked into a swing and it essentially killed him. And
wow.
And what happened to me, what wound up happening from my perspective is that my work life and my vacation life suddenly collided head on, and I found myself reverting to my training, and I was basically the first one on scene dealing with this kid. And, things were difficult, but on an automatic level. And that, this was a Saturday afternoon. He died Sunday afternoon. The whole week of the tournament thereafter had a whole nother meaning and so on and so forth. And when I got back to Florida, the combination of everything that had happened, the sudden stop of the support as I drove 1,300 miles from Kansas back to Florida, and my time thereafter, that was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And on my first day back on shift, which was the day that I was actually requested to attend Kaiser's funeral, I started recognizing the symptoms right away. And so I will say that I was extremely lucky in that situation because my education, my training, I started recognizing some of these signs and symptoms that were setting in. And I got very lucky beyond that because my department chaplain, reached out to me and said, "We got to go have a cup of coffee." And that's where it started for me. I mean, I had all of the classic signs and symptoms of traumatic stress response. I had the fact that I was consuming large quantities of alcohol. My tolerance for people around me was horrible. My fuse, my anger management was near non-existent, and I had near zero fuse in dealing with my wife and my children. I wasn't sleeping. I was seeing images all over the place. I was alienating myself. I had no interest in participating in anything. And, these are all things that I recognized. And I said it before, but I'll say it again, that I was lucky on so many levels in dealing with this because I mentioned my fire service chaplain. I happened to have a doctor's appointment scheduled the day after I got back to work for just something completely separate. Well, my PA at the time is a good friend of mine, and he's a retired firefighter who had been following the incident. And so he asked me how I'm doing. And in checking with him, I told him, well, I'm really not doing so hot. And before I could finish it out, he wrote me a note to be off work for 2 weeks so I could go get some help. And it's very tough. And in many ways, I feel that my situation, which drastically affected me and changed my life forever, my situation is kind of the exception to the norm, because as a culture in the emergency services arena, we don't ask for help. We've got this macho stereotype of, suck it up, buttercup, or, this is what we do. This is the job. And so, I look at it that I got very lucky. I had the right people who were there at the right time. And I was able to take that 2 weeks, utilize some resources that were available to me, and at least get back to a functioning level to be able to get back to work. So I got very, very lucky.
How long ago was this now?
This was August 1st, 2015. It was a Saturday afternoon.
Okay, so just over 2 years ago. And you said you took 2 weeks and got some assistance. What did it look like when you came back to work?
Everything had changed, is the only way I can really say it. I did not get any support from my employer. I had to actually make kind of a snide comment about what I had been through, about the first thing they said to me is, "Do we need to ask you for an autograph now?" And I'm like, so.
Whoa! Excuse me, I don't even understand that. Why would they even say that?
Because this incident, as a result of it, it became an international media incident in about 24 hours. So, unfortunately, I found myself, I would, once things settled in a little bit, I was doing interviews and, doing what had to be done to help the situation move along. And it reached the Tampa Bay area. It reached the Northeast. I mean, I was getting phone calls and messages from all over the country. And I get back to work, and this one guy who thinks he's just, trying to joke about it. First thing he says to me is, "Do we need to get your autograph now?" And I'm like, so it wasn't what I needed to see.
Right.
Beyond that, operationally at work, it was kind of status quo, but my perception of everything around me was heightened tenfold.
Yeah, I can imagine. You were hyper aware, hyper vigilant.
Absolutely. I mean, because of how long I've been doing what I do, and one of the things that we ask about, and we talk about in some of our classes, is if you've been in the fire service or if you've been in the emergency services arena for a little while, do you find that you approach things differently? Do you find that if you go out to a restaurant, do you have to sit in a certain area? And when you sit in a certain area, do you have to sit at a certain spot at the table? You go walking into a restaurant, do you start looking to see, well, are there two means of egress, two ways that I can get out, a primary and a secondary? Are you doing, your own personal threat assessments of things that are around? Well, that's what this job does to you over time. And, it's one of those things where all of those senses, all of that heightened awareness, I was very, something backfired, a vehicle backfired near me when I was at work, and I just about hit the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all of those little things, and it makes it very challenging. It was definitely an adjustment period for me to be able to get back to what I needed to do.
Well, it's interesting. I was just speaking to somebody today who's, we're just discussing about what I do when I'm not at my regular job, and we were just talking about the show, and she was like, do first responders really need like a show to talk about these things? I said, well, or like basically she was saying, is there really that much of a need? I said, well, think about it. Think about the average stress response from just, regular, just like anybody, right? Just any human being. I said, now think about it like this. Most people don't go and see people die every day or go into trauma and chaos and tragedy on a daily basis. So if the average person responds to stress in certain ways, wouldn't the person that's exposed to severe trauma every single day in their career life, wouldn't that make that 10 to 20 fold worse? So doesn't it stand to reason that, yes, we need to talk about these things? Because it's just so ironic that we know that to be true about people. If you talk to just the average person and make that conversation with somebody what I just said, but for some reason, it's something that's never really been addressed up until recently in the first responder world.
Absolutely. And what I've done in part of my recovery process from that particular incident, and kind of like an ongoing therapy for me, I wound up doing what I do best, and that is to research and create a curriculum to where I started researching, well, how is this dealt with in our culture? What's it like for first responders on a regular basis? What are the statistics? How do they compare? when we deal with stress responses, what are the perceptions and how things go? And how does this all compare to like line of duty death and, in terms of frequency and all these other things? And after about 8 months of research and data collection, I rolled out my class, and it's called the Batboy, the Firefighter, and the Brotherhood. And it talks about my incident with Kaiser Carlisle, but it also addresses historical perspectives. It talks about the numbers and the historical data about how, for example, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, in conjunction with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, has a program called Everyone Goes Home. And, it talks about the courage to be safe, so everyone goes home. And it talks about the 16 fire and life safety initiatives. Well, the 13th initiative in the fire service talks about mental health awareness and treatment and support for not only the member, but their families. Because statistically, it illustrates that firefighters and emergency responders in general are 3 times as likely to die from suicide as they are from a line of duty death. And, and I'm an instructor for this class, and I go back and I started researching a little deeper, and I started understanding that there are 2 very different cultural perspectives that need to be addressed to help defeat these stereotypes. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever seen in your career someone that, they're dealing with something, but they just don't want to speak up?
I will gladly answer that question, because that was my experience. When I was struggling as a paramedic with opiate abuse and, and it wound up turning to heroin, one day I was at work and amongst coworkers I'd worked with for a long time, and the next day I was gone because I showed up to work under the influence and lost my job and all that. It wasn't until 2 or 3 years later when my story got posted in the facingaddiction.org website, and it got posted all over the place. And I had old coworkers contact me and said, I had 2 responses. The first one was, I had no idea. I wish I could have done something. That was the first response. But even the more interesting response was the one from the folks that told me, I knew that you were struggling, but I didn't know what I could do, and I didn't feel I could do anything. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. So, and it's really interesting. We look at it from a line perspective, and we talked about it briefly already. But the cultural perspective of this is we don't talk about it. Suck it up, Buttercup. The fear of being perceived as weak, and so we bottle all these things up, and the culture drills it into us that you just got to get thicker skin because this is what the job is, and it's wrong. Our research has illustrated time and time again how that approach is wrong. Now, I spoke, in doing some of my research, I talked with brothers and sisters from around the country to find out what's their approach and how they do it. And it illustrated a second cultural perspective that needs to desperately be changed. That first cultural stereotype is the machismo, that we're strong, we're brave. And Jeff Dill from the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance refers to it as a cultural brainwashing. We're strong, we're heroes, we give help, we don't ask for help.
I had Jeff on the show a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that. Yep, absolutely.
So, and Jeff's a great guy, knows a lot. He knows exactly what he knows what he's talking about. He's an excellent resource to tap. But on the flip side of that, I also came to realize that there was an administrative perspective that was involved. The administration didn't want to deal with the problem any more than the line personnel wanted to speak up and talk about it. And so essentially what they would do is if somebody finally mustered up the courage and the strength to say something, how familiar does this sound? Oh, you're having a problem. Here's the phone number for EAP. good luck.
Yep.
And then wipe your hands of it.
Yep, sure, yeah, and that's it. And I got those responses too when I was in my place, in my journey, and I've seen it happen 1,000 times to others. Here's EAP, and I mean that's just a cop out, really, and
absolutely,
it's not, And going back to the original foundation of this conversation tonight, Mark, was about brotherhood. Well, does it just sound nice and look good on Chicago Fire on the TV show, or is it something that's real that we've just forgotten?
I've talked with a lot of people, and there is a definite feeling that the brotherhood is not what the brotherhood used to be, and that's unacceptable to me. I tell people all the time, and we teach it in our class, and I try to walk the talk in this one, of course. And I say, look, you need to talk. I'm here 24/7, 365. I was very fortunate. I've presented a few times here in Florida. I presented it in Ohio. I presented for the National Volunteer Fire Council's annual training summit in Myrtle Beach. And I told them, I said, look, don't fear what's going on around you. It's this reaction, the way you feel, and the things that are happening to you, they are normal responses to abnormal situations. And I tell people, and I said it here in teaching the Pinellas County 911 staff. I said, look, you have a duty and a responsibility to take care of one another. That's what this is all about. It's not about giving somebody a hard time. It's not about, granted, we joke around in the firehouse. It's one of our stress.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Our mechanisms. But when someone's having a problem, or someone actually has the guts and the courage to speak up and say they have a problem, and somebody wants to get on them about it, I told them, you better jump up and put a stop to it. Because myself, I lost one of my best friends in the line of duty, but I've also lost several people to the demon. And it's unacceptable. Here in Pinellas County, Florida, we had 8 suicides in a 4-year period in the first responder arena. And wow. 7 of those were in 2 years. Now, here's the catch to it, though. Those are the ones that we know about. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with the ones we don't know about.
Well, I just saw, you and I are Facebook friends, and I just saw something on there just within the last couple days that was something, it looked like you had lost somebody else.
I did. I've lost a couple of people here recently. My godson's father, one of his former colleagues from Lincoln Fire Department in Nebraska, committed suicide. Instead of just asking, he had, on top of what was going on at his work life, he had, and we've been talking about work. What we haven't been talking about is what life can do to you in general.
Yep. And the divorce rate, all that stuff. Yep.
Oh, absolutely. First responders, firefighters especially, we're 3 times as likely to get a divorce than the so-called average couple in the United States. The monetary, we talk about monetary stress, personal stress, family stress, job stress, all of these things, they continue to load into that backpack that you and I have talked about. Yep. And so it's one of those things where it just is unacceptable to me to recognize those numbers.
They say that pain shared is pain lessened. How would you feel if you had someone to unload your burdens with? Someone who has probably felt how you feel and been in your shoes. Someone who wants to help you to manifest dramatic and lasting change in your life. Not only do I host this show and speak around the country, I also do individual coaching and mentoring. I want to help you to climb out of the hole of isolation, despair, and hardship. Contact me at rescuetherescuer.com to set up your free, no-obligation consultation. I'm confident that together we can develop a plan that is tailor-made to you and your goals and purpose. Another angle too that I've realized, and I've been speaking a lot with a lot of people recently about this, is you're an educator, so you do a lot of educating for guys who are just coming on to the into the fire service or EMS provider world, and these guys are new, and it used to be, let's just say 15 years ago, that you might go on an overdose call maybe once a week, whereas now you're going on 3 or 4 a day. So you're seeing more death more regularly every single day than guys saw 10 or 15 years ago. So now that compounded effect of the immediate loss that you're seeing is just worse and worse, and it's not getting any better with the epidemic that we have everywhere in every corner in this country right now.
Absolutely. And and what's worse about this type of thing is that we still don't find appropriate ways to decompress and de-stress. So it's like, and I look at it from the perspective of hurricanes here in Florida. We hear about hurricanes all the time during the season. We get numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
Think about all the things that we're hearing now, and I'll reference Vegas for just a second. And as tragic as it was, a year before, we had the Pulse nightclub here in Orlando.
Yeah.
And these mass shootings are becoming so commonplace that we're almost becoming numb as a society to it.
I remember when I was a paramedic, and I remember we would, you'd BS with your partner and say, what's that career-ending call for you? And I remember saying to somebody, that call where I show up on the highway and it's a busload of kids versus a truck full of razor blades, and all the kids happen to be hemophiliac. That's my worst. That's the day when I walk away. And like you would make that extreme, like kind of almost in a jest type conversation. But like you just said, these mass casualty tragedies are becoming commonplace and the new norm. Just like the word PTSD is becoming so ingrained into our conversation and just in general conversation with people that its meaning is being completely lost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so tough. I mean, fortunately, or, as with so many things in the fire and emergency services arena, tragedy brings change. And we had a couple of high profile suicides down here that have really brought the issue to the forefront of what's going on in our area. But, what do we do? I mean, we're so inundated. It's a joke, and not in a good way. When you talk about, we're running these overdose calls time and time again. The guy, there are guys that I've talked to talking about how they just try to maintain a stock of certain drugs because they know they're going to go through them every shift.
Well, and to take what you just said a step further, when I was out there as a medic with a partner, I worked in Atlantic City, New Jersey, a very urban environment with a lot of substance abuse, and I remember distinctly going on like the third overdose call in the night, and my partner is pissed off because he didn't get to eat his dinner, and he's backed up on run sheets or on reports, and he's pissed off, and he's saying, why do we got to go save this scumbag? And while I'm hearing that, I'm realizing, oh my God, I can definitely not let this guy know how bad I'm struggling, because I just stole pills from grandma at the other house because I'm struggling with the same stuff that the guy we're going to help is struggling with, but I have nobody to talk to about it.
Absolutely. And that's, we burn out, we deal with our issues. We don't always deal with our issues in a healthy way.
Nope.
And that creates a lot of problems. And and amazingly enough, and me, I may have a tendency to oversimplify sometimes, but I look at it that if you have the courage to take that first step, it's amazing how much you can avoid if you do it early enough. We talk about 4 phases of stress response that are involved, and anything from, being a little edgy to all the way down to the deep end of the road where you're into hardcore substance abuse. You're into alcoholism. You're into, you're at that point of possibly attempting and or succeeding at suicide. But if we look at that perspective, if we are able to learn and support each other and represent the brotherhood that we are supposed to be, and when I say brotherhood, I mean brothers and sisters, obviously. But
of course, yeah.
If we are truly were to act as the brotherhood that we are, so much of this could be avoided. And this is where we developed the backpack theory. And with this, and you and I have talked about this before, but you come and you're the young 21-year-old kid or whatever that's just coming into the fire and emergency services arena for the first time, and you're young and dumb and naive, and everything that we see is what we have learned on TV. For some of us that are old enough to remember watching Johnny and Roy on Emergency.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Everything always had a happy ending that was solved with EKG and an IV.
And IV, lactated ringers, and bring them the Rampart. Yep.
That's it. And everybody was suddenly fine.
Yeah.
But then we start running these calls, and they say that if you're going to join us, we're going to give you everything that you need to survive in this career, and you'll be great. But there's one catch, and you got to wear this backpack for the rest of your life. And every call that you run is going to put a stone in that backpack. And the size of the stone varies depending on what call you just ran. Okay, so you're young, you're energetic, you're all set to go, and you say, "Yes, sir, got it. Give me that backpack. I got this. Let's go. I will take care of it." So you run a couple of calls here and there, and and here's your first call. There's a little stone because you're a standalone medic all by yourself. Here's something a little bigger where you're running a good trauma accident. Here's your first cardiac arrest, which is the 85-year-old granny, which I refer to as the natural end of life cardiac arrest. And these are all fairly natural. Well, now you run that first kid code, that first unnatural cardiac arrest where the person was basically completely healthy, or you run a high profile incident. Think of what the stones going into the backpacks are like for the first on medics from the Pulse nightclub, or what the responders had to do in Vegas a few weeks ago. Those are all huge huge stones that go in the backpack. Now, when you're we had, back in December of 2014, we had one of our police officers in our town was shot and killed. And the medic that was taking care of him, he was in his first 911 based job, first fire department, and he was a year and a half in. Think about the size of the stone that goes into his backpack that night.
And I mean, you're hit the nail on the head. I relate to it, and it's like you said, we both talked about it before on our first phone call we had together. I had written an article about a year and a half ago about that backpack full of rocks that we carry around, and unless we find a place to unload those rocks, they get heavier and they weigh us down more. The glass being half empty or half full is not the proper question. It's a matter of how heavy it is, because the longer we hold it, the heavier it becomes.
Absolutely. And with that, I've talked about some of these stones and the varying sizes, and when we're a year in, that's no big deal. That kid's going to look at you and go, "I got this, no problem. Load them on. I'm good." 1 year in, you're surviving quite nicely. Well, now go 3 years, 5 years, 10, 20, 30 if you're lucky. And that backpack gets pretty damn full and pretty darn heavy. And before you know it, it's not another big stone. It's that one little itty bitty pebble, that call that you've run 1,000,000 times in your career. It's that, and what I think you and I made the reference to this once jokingly, in poor taste, as many of our jokes often are in our arena. But you're running on that same urban outdoorsman, that homeless person that you've dealt with 1,000 times before. And that's the littlest of pebbles that just comes flying out of left field, lands on the top of the backpack, and all of a sudden it drops you to your knees. And now you're broken. And the ability, the necessity to find ways to remove that stress, to find healthy ways to mitigate that stress are so critical. And we've lost too many brothers and sisters, and because they're afraid or unwilling to speak up. And I tell everybody in all my classes, I said, in my class, I give out a sheet with about 15 different resources, everything from a Facebook page which is a PTSD support group, to any number of free available resources to help people and their families get back on track.
I hope you add the show to it, because we are a free resource. Just had to throw a plug out there. Of course.
Shameless plugs, always, absolutely.
Of
but
course.
The point of what I'm saying,
I hear you though.
And I tell people, look, if absolutely nothing else, you have my business card, which has my name and my phone number and my email. If you don't know what to do, you reach out to me. And if I can't help you, I've got resources all over the country that can.
I say the same thing. And, one of the other things, Mark, is a lot of people ask me why, you've been out of the fire, so, you haven't been on an ambulance or worn a uniform in a couple of years now. Why do you even do any of this? And I say, why? Because even though I'm not in that world anymore, to that capacity, that's a place where I spent half of my adult life. And I care about those people. I care about anybody who puts a uniform on and gets in and does the job. And I know how bad I struggled and felt that I had to suffer in silence. And I don't want anybody else to have to feel that way. And if I can do something about it, I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. And like we were talking about earlier, you're still wearing a backpack.
Yeah.
You're still carrying it. And one of the best things that you can do is to be able to help other people not go down the path that you did.
That's it.
I've made my fair share of mistakes in my life and in my career, as have we all. And I'll continue to say it every time someone talks to me. I had the absolute perfect luck of the right people in the right place at the right time. And I had that courage, that strength of character, not strength of character, it's that fortitude to want to move forward, get things handled, and get back on track. My life will never be the same as it was prior to August 1st, 2015. I still see images of Kaiser in my head every night. I still don't sleep. I still have setbacks from time to time.
Sure.
But I'm very fortunate that I have a wife and a family and some key friends that are always supportive of. And the one thing that I would say to any brother or sister is that no matter where you are, no matter what you think, and no matter how you feel, you need to understand that you are not alone. And as responders, that's probably our biggest fear.
Yeah, isolation and alone. You're right. And we're going to wrap up here, but I'll just, I'll end it on two points that you can comment on, and then I want you to be able to kind of do your own little shameless promoting for a moment, if you will. One of them is the fact that your experience was entirely different than mine. However, because we've had similar experiences with different circumstances, we're both uniquely able to reach people in a different way, in a different but the same way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that's why, that's why we do what we do, and we're a minority, but it's going to take, as they say, it takes a village. It takes a village of guys like us who are willing to speak up and turn the volume up when people don't want to hear it.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, my set of circumstances and what I went through is my set of circumstances. And I say it all the time. I don't claim that to be the been there, done that firefighter paramedic. I will say that my experiences have made me a seasoned veteran paramedic. But you know what? If someone's going to come and talk to me and say, "Look, Mark, this is the situation I've dealt with, and now I've started drinking heavily and I can't seem to stop, or I've started hitting the pills and I can't seem to stop," and I will sit there and I will listen and I will empathize, and I will show love. But the reality of it is that I'm not qualified to help that particular person. But I can certainly refer them and put them in contact with colleagues of mine who are addiction counselors and and can have resources to get people the help that they need, sometimes at no charge at all. There was a gentleman here that was a 911 dispatcher here in Florida. He went up a little further north. Just recently, we found out that he had a horrible relapse due to his PTSD. And when we finally tracked him down, we were actually able to get him into a treatment facility for a full term stay where $50,000 didn't cost him a penny. That's what this is supposed to be. This is what the Brotherhood is supposed to do for one another.
Well, and I just interviewed, and I'm sure you've heard of them, the Code Green campaign. I just had them on the show the other night, a couple nights ago, and they're offering free services, treatment, therapy, whatever, free to anybody who responded to the Vegas incident.
Absolutely. And the Code Green campaign is one of a multitude of resources that I offer out as part of my program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that that's why I put this thing together. This wasn't about me. The first two episodes were, for those of you that I hope have listened, is that the first episode was me explaining why I'm doing it, and the second was telling my story. And now I utilize this platform to be able to speak to the world about what's available and talk to people like yourself who have had your experience and can help somebody with it. So the last thing I want to say, because we are definitely out of time, is something it's a quote that I really kind of think is important, and it's something that needs to, this kind of sums it up. It says that there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Basically, what we need to do and what we are doing is shining a light on uncomfortable subjects that aren't as sexy as Halligan bars and 1 3/4 hose lines. And we have to shine the light, and to the naysayers, to the people that say that this isn't relevant, it's not important, it's not cool. You're right, it's not cool. But if we can help somebody keep their family together, keep their marriage together, keep their career together, keep themselves from committing, from dying by suicide or ending up in jail, then that's what we have to do.
Absolutely, and the very last slide of my presentation, the way I wrap up my presentation is we talk about a simple saying that I have, and I got it from somebody in the Facebook forum that one of the Facebook forums that I'm a part of. It says, If we can save one person from the effects of stress and PTSD, we win. But if we can save more, we're saving us all.
That's right. That's right, Mark. Listen, it's been great having you on here. This has been a really eye-opening, illuminating conversation with me, and for me, and I've really enjoyed it. I want you to take a moment and share where people can find you, where people can access the class that you offer, or anything you want to share with everybody. Please do.
Outstanding. Steve, I want to start off by saying I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you tonight. It's been a great experience. I really love the conversation, and I'm looking forward to many more with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My class, one of my class that I teach on first responder stress and PTSD, which I am absolutely happy and thrilled and willing to come to you if you'd like to host it, is called the Batboy, the Firefighter, and the Brotherhood. Lessons in First Responder Stress, learned from a boy named Kaiser Carlisle. You can find me most effectively through my company website, 5 Bugles Institute, which online is at www.5buglesinstitute.com. And 5 is spelled out, so it's FIVEBUGLESINSTITUTE.com. And don't ask me to do that again quickly, because I probably Shoot me an email, mark@5buglesinstitute.com, or call me on my phone, 727-452-9266. I would love to come out and present my program. In fact, right now I'm actually offering a discount on my speaker fees to help get the word out, because I've had a lot of positive feedback, and the message stands true regardless of the arena that you're in. So if you'd like to have that class, I'd love to come give it to you. If you're interested in any of my other classes on leadership, if you're interested in culture change and how to create culture change and survive culture change within your organization, I'd love to come out and present to you. So 5 Bugles Institute, that's our website. Mark at 5 Bugles Institute, that's my email, or my cell phone, 727-452-9266. Anything I can do to help my brothers and sisters around the country, around the world, 24/7, 365, know that you are not alone. I'm here. I will listen. I will do whatever I can to help you out. And if I can't help you, I've got resources that can. No one stands alone.
I think that's one of those drop the microphone and walk away at that. Thanks again for coming on the show, Mark. It's been a pleasure. This has been another great episode of Rescue the Rescuer, and we'll see you next week.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope it'll help you or your loved one. If you get a chance, I really would appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It will really help me out in many ways. Take care, everyone, and remember, you are not alone in your struggle.
I want to give a big shout out to one of our supporters, the Addictions Academy. The Addictions Academy is the world's foremost accredited trainer of addiction coaches, addiction counselors, interventionists, and international master addiction coaches, offering on-site training at your rehab or facility, live virtual classroom webinars, or on-demand classes covering an extensive availability of courses and certifications. Check them out at theaddictionsacademy.com or call Dr. Callie Estes and her team at 1-800-706-0318.
Thanks for listening to Rescue the Rescuer. For show notes and more, head on over to rescuetherescuer.com.
We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.com. This show is produced by James Healy of RecoveryInnovators.com. If you have a message and want to start a show of your own, contact him and let him know that we sent you.